I've got quite a tough gig today because I've got 15 minutes to condense 5,000 years of timeless wisdom. Does that sound like quite a tough gig? Yeah, it is quite a tough gig. So what I was thinking was this. I'm going to turn it over to you to start with, right? And I'm going to ask this question. If the future of the world depended on the state of your mind, how you are holding your mind, what thoughts are in your mind, how would the future look? How should the future look? Any ideas? Sustainable. Very good. Thank you. Yeah. Very topical. Anything else? Anyone else? How about compassion? Altruistic. But how about present? Would you like to be present? Because I don't know about you, but sometimes life is just a little bit overwhelming. And there's a reason for that, because a lot of commentators, futurologists are today likening the time we live in to the Second Renaissance. So in the 1500s, we had the First Renaissance, and we had the globalization of the world, where the great explorers traveled, Vasco da Gama, Magellan, Columbus, redrew the map of the world. Then, of course, we have globalization of trade today and travel. Then we had the information revolution in the 15th century. In the 1450s, a German entrepreneur called Johann Gutenberg created a new technology with a press and pieces of paper replacing animal skin or parchment, and created an information revolution. 1,500 years of European civilization and recordings were doubled in 50 years. And today we have the information age. So we know, for example, that in 1989 in the developed world, there were 10% of the population using mobile phones. In the developing world, 1%. Fast forward to today, in the developing world, 90%, and in the developed world, we have more mobile phone subscribers than people. The only thing growing more quickly than that is data capturing devices. So I'm talking not just phones, I'm talking dishwashers, cars, MRI scanners, telescopes. So in 2011, there were as many data capturing devices as people. There are now 3 times as many data capturing devices as people. But it's not just change, it's the speed of change. So let's look at some stats. It took electricity 46 years to become widespread through the world. That was in the 1860s. Fast forward to the 1920s, it took the television 26 years to become widespread. Fast forward to the 70s, it took the PC 16 years. Mobile phone, 13 years. Internet, 7 years. Social media, 5 years. Something is going on, right? The speed of adoption is more quick. That's the problem. So how does this relate to mindfulness? Well, you hear it used a lot. It's a bit of a buzzword. And really, it's this idea that life just zips by sometimes. You have no time to enjoy. You're not in the present moment because your mind is commenting. Your mind is chattering. But thinking is not the enemy. So we know our mind projects forward to plan. We know our mind also analyzes what's happened in the past, and that can be helpful. But if we're stuck in the past, or we catapult ourselves into the future too often, then that can be uncomfortable. So mindfulness in its simplest terms is about your relationship with your thinking. As Mark Twain said, I spent a lot of time mostly worrying about things that never happened. Another quote from Gandhi, there is more to life than increasing its speed. And here's one more quote for you, see if you can tell me where it's from. The past is history, the future a mystery, and all we have now is a gift, and that's why it's called the present. That's from Kung Fu Panda. Actually, it was lifted from Lao Tzu, so it did have some spiritual background. So I know you're not supposed to crack jokes, but I have to liven this up a bit. And actually, this should be a fun topic as well, okay? Because it's about finding out who you are. So very quickly, the history of mindfulness really came from Eastern religion. we go back to Buddhism. Before that, we go back to Hinduism, the oldest religion in the world, talks about meditation. And I will come on to the overlap between meditation and mindfulness in a minute. We go into Buddhism, much more emphasis there on mindfulness and meditation. So how did it get from the East to the West? Well, there was a Vietnamese monk called Thich Nhat Hanh who won the Nobel Prize for Peace, and he introduced mindfulness to Jon Kabat-Zinn, who is often called the master of modern mindfulness. This is a medical doctor who introduced mindfulness in the Massachusetts hospital using the mindfulness-based stress reduction clinic. And he gives the best definition of mindfulness, which is really paying attention on purpose to what's going on. And I'd like to read you one quote from what he says to his patients when they turn up suffering from terrible diseases, when he introduces them to the concept of mindfulness. From our point of view, as long as you are breathing, there is more right with you than wrong with you, no matter what is wrong. Over the next 8 weeks, we're going to pour energy in the form of attention into what is right with you, much of which we never notice or take for granted or don't fully develop in ourselves. And let the rest of the medical centre and your healthcare team take care of what is wrong and just see what happens. So I think that's a really great summary of this practice. Now, I mentioned before there's an overlap between meditation and mindfulness. You hear the two used interchangeably, and they're really both techniques to calm the frenzied mind. They have their origins in spiritual practices going back thousands of years ago. Meditation is the bigger of the two topics and actually is about regulating your thoughts, achieving a higher level of consciousness. Mindfulness is about staying in the present, and mindfulness is actually a form of meditation. So we're going to do a mindfulness-based breath meditation shortly. First, I just want to come through a couple of quick principles of mindfulness, just some takeaways for you. My favorite one, awareness. It's this idea of being aware of where you are, what you're doing. And how do we do that? Well, a great technique for that is journaling. And this was introduced by a lady called Julia Cameron, who wrote The Artist's Way, a very popular book where every morning she journals for a few minutes when she wakes up, getting her thoughts down on paper, out of her head. Another technique can be what I call mindful listening. So there's a difference between hearing and listening. You can hear sound, but listening actually involves concentration. Next time you're in a conversation, you might be drifting off, maybe think about what the person is actually saying. What are they not saying? What's the subtext below the words? What's their body language like? Think of listening as a form of meditation, and you might get more out of the conversation. Thirdly, another technique of awareness, just noticing things around you. On your commute to work, perhaps take more notice of the environment, maybe trees or the sky. This idea of actually just focusing on our environment rather than just what's in our head. Another great technique is kindness. You might think, well, that's not really mindful, but it is a very strong mindfulness practice. This idea that we get out of our own head, look for opportunities to be kind to people. It's ranked as very important by a lot of the big professional coaches, Anthony Robbins, Arianna Huffington. They all mention kindness as a form of spiritual practice, meditation. In fact, there's a good joke about life coaches. How many life coaches does it take to change a light bulb? None. They're all waiting for the light bulb to realize it has to change itself. I've got one more joke, and then we'll practice the mindfulness technique. And this is my last joke today, I promise. So I'm walking to work, and this Hare Krishna monk comes up to me and says, "Do you believe in reincarnation?" I said, "Not you again." So let's now move on to a breath-based practice, just something really simple, something grounding, just to use. You can take it away with you. And really the important thing to notice here is that I like to say the breath is the remote control to the brain. And if you didn't know that, that to me is a wow. Because at the back of your skull, you've got 175 nerve cells in this bony part here called the pre-Botzinger complex, and they're monitoring your breath. And they're also in charge of attention, excitement, anxiety, and relaxation. So if you didn't know that your breath was a remote control to the brain, that's not a good thing not to know. It's like sitting at home on the remote control and it's changing channels randomly without any pattern. And that's how we breathe. And I liken it to having the 175 most important people on speed dial. Not only do they take your call, but they're listening to every word you say, whether you tell them or not. They're listening, and they're telling the rest of the brain. And this has come from some great research that's come out of Harvard. So, let's try some breathing, shall we? So just sit back in the chair. Maybe just close your eyes for the moment. Maybe put your hands, just rest your hands on your leg. Close your eyes. And just begin to pick up the breath on the outside of the nostrils. And we're going to breathe into a count in a moment. Before we do that, let's just focus on our body. Feel the connection points with our glutes on the chair, our feet on the floor, our shoulder on the back of the chair. And we'll just start to concentrate on the sensations of the breathing. A soothing, calming breath. Maybe starting to breathe a little bit more slowly, a little bit more deeply. And we're just going to inhale to the count of 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale 1, 2, 3, 4. Feel your belly inhale. 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale 1, 2, 3, 4. Inhale 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale 1, 2, 3, 4. Inhaling for 1, for 2, for 3, for 4. Letting go for 1, 2, 3, 4. Feeling your abdomen fill with air. 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale 1, 2, 3, 4. Inhaling for 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale 1, 2, 3, 4. Just meeting your breath. And you can open your eyes now. So this simple act of 4-4 breathing is a great way of just calming the nervous system down, lowering the heart rate, reducing blood pressure, and it's always available. So if you're stressed, having a difficult day, I recommend this 4-4 breathing. In fact, in the Marines, they use an extended version of this called 4-4-4-4 breath, where they hold for 4 and they wait for 4 after the exhalation. So this breathing technique is a very powerful technique. So I'll just end by saying that mindfulness is available to you all. It's growing in importance. In leadership now, we see this new idea called conscious leadership. And the difference between a creative leader and a reactive leader is by being mindful, by paying attention to what's going on, being curious, being open, being kind. And of course, you're all here today because you're mindful about the environment and the buildings that we live in. So you're already on your mindfulness path. So I'd just like to wrap up by saying thank you for your attention. If anything I've said to you, or the words beneath it, speaks to you, then pay attention to it. Have a great day. Thank you.